Tonight I want to talk about eclipses. There are two eclipses coming up in this general area, what I would consider the US. The first one is in October. It is what's called an annular eclipse, which is, we're going to talk about that a little bit. It is the most common eclipse. You'll actually be able to see some of the eclipses from Riverside. The shadow that eclipses cast can be huge, but the difference between a percentage of an eclipse and 100% is night and day. I mean, one of the eclipses I photographed was in Iceland, and we couldn't quite get far enough east to make it 100%. It was 99.6%. Didn't even interest me. It didn't catch my attention at all, really. We still photographed it because we had a group there, but eclipses are magical, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Basically, a partial eclipse is where the moon moves in, doesn't cover the sun 100%. It covers a portion of it. That's called a partial, obviously. Sure. That better? This was working here a moment ago. The next page.
Should be able to hit that. It should just go
I
right.
did. Oh, that's right. This is a PC, is
No, this is an Apple.
I thought you said you had PCs.
Well, why did it get stuck? It worked earlier today. Hang
It
on.
did. It
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
just worked a moment
Hang
ago.
on, let me grab the rack. Let's see. What'd you do, Bruce? Now we've got the other one up
You
there.
just did it.
By moving this,
Go back to the Acrobat.
I'll let you guys do it.
There we
Okay,
go.
there we go. Maybe it has a timer on it. Okay, the one coming up in April, by the way, the one in October is going to be what we call an annular eclipse. We'll talk about that in a few moments. The most spectacular one is coming up in April. We are going to talk a little bit about weather. I know one of you mentioned weather and stuff like that. We'll talk a little bit about researching. By the way, if you have a question, I would prefer questions, just raise your hand and I'll answer your question, okay? So
Are you going to talk about the one in 2017? Did you make it to that?
I did. We actually had a pretty fairly good sized group in Idaho. Russ was there. Yeah, and the most spectacular one is a total eclipse. If I could zoom in on this, you can see the fire ring around the edge of the sun. This was shot with a 600 millimeter f4 lens. We'll talk about lenses and that in a little while. This is a composite. This is not my image, by the way. This is a composite in Monument Valley. You can see the two mittens on there's the west mitten, east mitten on the left side there. And this is at sunrise between the mittens, and the viewer or the photographer composited a total eclipse into it. It's nice, but it's not real. But it would do well in competition. The annular eclipse is a total eclipse, but the moon is further away from the earth. You know, it doesn't have a consistent distance. It turns in a elliptical. If you want to know anything about stars and moon and stuff like that, yes, Carl. So an annular eclipse is a total eclipse, but the moon is further away. So you see a ring. And actually that's what you have on your t-shirt is a ring of, but it's an annular ring because it doesn't have this look to it. You don't see the fire. Russ.
So, the upper right image that you showed there, is that a composite or was
No.
that an image?
That's not my image, but it's not a composite.
It's not a composite, so
Yeah.
it's actually shot that way.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I like that image.
A hybrid, there's only 5 hybrids in the 21st century. A hybrid is one that goes from an annular to a total back to an annular. We probably won't see one in our lifetime, at least in my lifetime.
Yeah, they had one earlier this year in Australia. I had some friends who went down to see it, all that far just for a minute and a half in totality.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're cool. There are people, I don't know, they have a word for them, I know. There are people that travel for these things. I mean, they'll travel.
Chaser.
Yes, they keep track of the seconds that they are under. I have a little over 15 minutes under total eclipse, which is not bad.
What's the record?
An acquaintance, not a friend, he has over 100 minutes. And these guys travel, they will often, you will find that these people that follow eclipses will make their plans 3 to 5 years ahead of time. Our April workshop is in Texas, sort of south or not too far from the Mexican border. And we're looking for rooms, called a Motel 6. $520 a night for a Motel 6. And they only had 2 rooms available. So, yeah, prices can get pretty expensive. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about what we call C1, 2, 3, and 4, called contact. You'll see on this image here, and there we go. Okay, I can get rid of it. C1 is, where do we go? You'll see if you look in the upper right-hand corner at about 2 o'clock, 1 or 2 o'clock on the sun, you'll see just a little portion of it. I actually enlarged it, and you can see where the moon touches the sun. Doesn't actually touch the sun, but touches our view of it. And that is the beginning of what we call a partial eclipse. That's known as C1. C2 is where the total eclipse begins. And you will notice on the lower left hand at about 7 o'clock is what's called a diamond effect. This is the beginning of the total eclipse. And this is where your filter comes off. Everything you've been shooting up to this point has a 1,000 stop neutral density filter on it. I've had people say, oh, I'll just stack a bunch of NDs. It's like, okay, yeah, you have 10 stop NDs. You have to have 100 of them to get the same thing. So it takes a lot of light to cut back on. This is where you pull the filter off, and the duration of these will vary. The duration of the total that we're doing in Texas, I believe, is
I think it's 4 minutes.
4 minutes and 20, where we're going to be at 4 minutes and 25 seconds. The longest one that I had photographed was in Mexico.
91.
And it was 7 minutes and 29 seconds, I think, where we were. We were at the tip of Baja.
Was that the 91?
Yes, yeah.
That was near Mazatlan.
Yeah. A lot of people went to Hawaii because it went through Hawaii,
Right.
and nothing but clouds. Didn't see a thing. We drove to Baja, never driven to Baja before, full length of it. That was quite an adventure.
Yeah.
And we took what we called sacrificial cameras along for the federales. We bought a number of older Nikons with some lenses mounted on them, and we set those on top of the tarps. So if we got stopped, it's like, here, because we had, I had 15 Hasselblads with me. So we didn't want to lose those. So anyway, this is second contact, known as C2. C3, you will see the diamond effect again, but at the other end.
But real quick, those Hasselblads, were those digital or film?
Oh, those were film.
Okay.
They were,
that's
they were film. And we had 70 millimeter backs. And I took somebody along, their only job was to change backs. In 7.5 minutes, we shot a little over 1,500 images. So in 2 1/4. And interesting story. About 3 days, I used a lab called A&I, probably one of the best labs in California. About 3 days after I submitted my work, I had an account with them. They've done a lot of work for me. I get a call of A&I. I get a call from the I. His name is Ish. He said, "Bob, this is Ish." I said, "Ish, why are you calling me?" He said, "Well, you know that C41 that you gave us, somebody put most of it in the E6 chemicals." And so we had a little negotiation. He said, "I'll send you anywhere on the planet for the next eclipse or two if you want." So I said, "You know, better yet, because it was a ways away." I said, "Credit my account 25,000. Done." And he did. So, but we still had coverage. We still had some 2 1/4 coverage and 35mm coverage. So we got what we wanted for the client. This was a client shoot, a commercial shoot. So this is where the filters go back on. As soon as you see that diamond effect, throw your filter on. And we're going to talk a little bit about filters. This is another one. You can see the diamond effect is just a little bit brighter on this one. You will find yourself, if you're shooting this, you're going to be shooting fast. Very fast. I don't know how many images you took for us when we were.
I have a ton of them.
Yeah. This one, I probably shot 700 images roughly of the total. I think I had 3 cameras set up. Jeff had 2 or 3
I had
cameras.
two. I was trying to do a filming of it
Mhm.
as well as sitting there and doing the stills.
Yeah.
Is what I was trying. But one of the problems you have is that the sun is moving and it's hard with a 600mm to keep the sun in the frame.
Yes, yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's one of the considerations when you're shooting this. C4, you'll see if you look in the lower left-hand corner, about 7 o'clock, that's the last where the moon touches the sun. Doesn't physically touch it, it's just your eyeballs see it. That's known as C4. And we're done. Start packing your cameras. And if you are somewhere away from home, make a fast run to the exit. When we left, we actually stayed for another day in Idaho. Some of the traffic was 2-3 hours getting out. I mean, the road was jammed.
That was 17.
Yeah, 2017.
So we were in Oregon, we had the same experience. We thought we'd wait a day, you know, and then apparently Oregon coned off some of the passing lanes to deliberately calm the traffic.
Yeah.
We were going like 10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
2 hours.
A lot of places, unless they've gone through cities in particular, unless they've gone through an eclipse before, they have no idea what they're in for.
Yeah.
And it is amazing if you've been to them, the differences. We're going to talk a little bit about safety considerations. If you are observing the eclipse without photographing it, buy some cheap eclipse glasses. You can buy the one in the upper left-hand corner. It's just one you can hold up like a welder's glass. These things are $3 to $5 a piece. They're not expensive. It is estimated on the annular eclipse, actually on either one of them, that there will be between 20 to 100 people who will have permanent eye damage. From just, oh yeah, I can just look through my sunglasses or and it doesn't take long. Your eye will actually burn holes in it. So be careful, don't look at it without an eclipse glass for that. This is actually our setup at Oregon, or I'm sorry, at Idaho. Yeah. I thought I had Russ in here somewhere, but I don't. We were just out of Meridian, about an hour.
Towards Cascades.
For-
Isn't it Cascades? What's the name?
I don't remember.
It's right- it's
We
outside.
had actually picked a different area. I do a lot of research for mine, and this one I started researching about 3 years ahead of time. We wanted to have an area that we could camp in, because hotels were already booked up. We found a BLM property, top of a mountain, already cleared. A few months before we got there, two brothers from Texas had just sold their fracking business. Paid, bought 400,000 acres of BLM property in Idaho. And then they immediately fenced it with 12-foot fences, became their private hunting preserve. And they gated it with armed motorized vehicles with guards, and we couldn't get up there. They sold this business for what, $32 billion, if I remember. So 400,000 acres was nothing to them. Yeah, and then they also bought in Boise, Meridian, some of the areas, a bunch of hotels, canceled all reservations, quadrupled the prices and booked them solid. So anyway, safety considerations. These are filters that we made. Some of these are basically plastic. You can use cardboard, you can use anything and put a Mylar. You can buy Mylar, Amazon has it. It's about $12 a sheet.
It's Bader film.
Yes. They make them in 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch. It's actually pretty cheap.
And the Bader film comes with two strings, so there's how many stops, one's for photographic only, and there's one that's for visual, so.
Yes.
I've always.
And they have to be certified.
Yeah.
Some, turns out some that were sold through Amazon in 2017 weren't certified and Amazon got sued over it.
Yeah.
So this is a homemade filter. Works great. I wouldn't use it. Do you have any idea why? Take a look at it. How long do you think it would take to take this off and put it back on? You can see it has 3, looks like Velcro straps, and then somebody put a rubber band around it. When you only have 2.5 minutes of total eclipse, you're going to spend about 30 seconds putting that back on. It's way too long.
So one of the things I saw that Jeff had on his was heavy enough that it would stay on the camera. And all it was a sheet of Mylar, and he had glued 2 pieces of wood around the outside perimeter, and it would just sit right on top of your lens side.
That's what he had right there. He's looking through the one in the top image. And it basically was heavy enough just to set on his sunshade.
It's the plumbing section of Home Depot also is, find something the right diameter. I mean, I had several ones that is made out of PVC pipes.
And you
I
just,
paid
you just want them to
$95
drop
for
down.
95 millimeter Mylar filter
Mhm.
for that, so $25 and make it do it yourself. That was really pretty good.
The major consideration is you want it to come off and on quickly. Honestly, it shouldn't take you more than about 3 seconds to do that. You just set it down, make sure it has weight. And I was gonna go over this later, but I'll talk about it now. 2 things will happen when the total portion comes. The temperature is gonna drop severely. And you'll actually see the shadow moving towards you. The temperature will drop, and with that will come a wind. And I don't mean a breeze. We had a tarp up, not the 2017, but the one in Mexico. We had a 10 by 10 tarp up. It whipped it so hard it blew it off over. We had not big stakes. We had a stake to the ground. Wind probably was 40-45 miles an hour. Because of the temperature drop so quickly, it created a breeze. So now in Idaho, it dropped, but not, we had what, maybe a 20-25 degree change. And a heavy breeze, but not a big wind.
Now, does it help to see that advancing shadow to be on an elevated position? Because I've never seen it.
Not elevated, not really. In Idaho, we were right next to a river. We ended up finding a really nice place. We were on the river. You could actually see, if you had a wide enough lens, you could actually get a reflection on the water if you wanted to. But it made the eclipse so small, so tiny. We weren't elevated at all. And we
were kind of down in a valley.
yeah, a little bit.
Because there was a river running right next to us, and Next day, you got to see a lot of people river raft.
Now, the one thing that you need to be prepared for, look how he's looking, not quite straight up, but almost. If you are on a Wimberley head or some sort of a gimbal head, most of them will go maybe 45 to 60 degrees and then they stop. So be sure that you're on a head that will go almost straight up, that you have the room to do that. We actually had to tilt our tripods back a little bit, let the back two legs down to do that. So anyway, again, if you're going to build a filter, build one that goes on and off quick. These are some of the filters you can buy. I actually bought one like this. It was through Amazon. It will fit. It's actually a little bit too big for a couple of my lenses. I'm going to shoot. I have a 600, an 800, and a 1200. I'm going to be shooting with all three of those. And this one will work on any of them. It cost me $58, I think it was. Actually pretty cheap. These are other filters. The top left one is actually made for smaller lenses or for binoculars like this. Again, if you're going to look through a binocular, be sure it's filtered somehow. This is actually a nicely homemade one. It's fairly lightweight. It's made out of cardboard and just a sheet across it. You could probably make that for less than $15. So if you're into, I'm okay. Okay, preparation prior to their location, like in real estate. Pick a location, and oftentimes people have already settled on locations a couple years out. One, because they want to be able to get rooms. It allows ample time for a campsite, rent a room, stuff like that. You will, unfortunately, sometimes you'll run into a hotel or an RV park or something like that. I did on one of ours. They had no idea there was a eclipse coming. And they didn't want to take a reservation 2 years ahead of time. And I made the mistake of saying, and they were in Oregon, right on the center. I mean, literally, they were less than 100 yards off the center line of the eclipse. And it was an older couple that owned it. I talked to the lady and, well, we don't book that far out. And I said, I want 10 spots. I'll pay you $100 a spot. She wouldn't do it. Then I found out later that she found out there was an eclipse because I told her. So choose a spot that where you've done some research regarding weather. Weather's one of the biggest deals. When we did the Mexico one, the person that we shot for, it was a lady, it was a huge home decor service. They decorated model homes, stuff like that. She chose to go to Hawaii, partly because I think of the mystique of Hawaii and the fun, and didn't see it at all. We went to Baja and saw all of it. So get online, do your research. Initially, the April one, somebody wanted me to go to Maryland. They had properties there. You can bring your group up. I did a little research on Maryland. There was an 85% chance we'd have cloud coverage in that month. So Maryland was out. We are going to southern Texas, and there is if I remember, it's like a 12 or 13% chance of cloud cover, which is the lowest I could find. I looked everywhere around, through the center of the where the eclipse is going to be, and that's about the lowest. Yeah,
Texas.
we're either looking at, and they're not too far apart, Waco or Kerrsville in Texas. So study the weather, pick a place that is going to have clear skies. The other thing, and we did a lot of this in 2017, practice. We go through settings, filters on, filters off, because when you're in the eclipse, you get excited. As much as I had told my wife her first eclipse with me was 2017. As much as I told her about light and all of that stuff, she thought she was ready for it until she saw it. The light is like a light you will never have seen in your lifetime, literally. Every light, all the light around you is 100% reflected light. There is no direct sunlight at all. Everything changes, colors change, birds change, everything changes. The watercolor changes because of the light. It is 100% reflected. Part of my wife's job, this is my wife over here, by the way. Part of her job was to take pictures of us and that changing light as it happened. And it will blow you away. You know, I've often thought of, we talk about the Mayan Indians and eclipses for some reason, they're equated with eclipses.
Yeah.
And they worshiped those things. I mean, after being through my first one, I could totally understand why. For many people, it is very much a spiritual experience. And until you've been through one, it's a little difficult to understand it. But once you've gone through one, you quickly understand it. I don't know how your feeling was about it, Russ, but
I sit back and I kind of think about, the experience down in Mexico where it was 90 minutes? How long was the eclipse there?
well, it was a little over 7.5 minutes, I think
Oh,
it
okay.
was, the
Well,
total part of
Can
it.
you imagine being in one of those eclipses where it was 90 minutes
Yeah,
and you're back where you don't have any, you would thought the world came to an end.
And they did.
Yeah.
So.
no, it's very much an experience that you will never see lighting like that again. And for photographers, for us, it's all about lighting. Everything is about lighting as a photographer. So you will see lighting you've never seen in your life.
I just thought, Bob, it was my first eclipse and it was an awesome experience. And my son Russell and his wife and Lucas, my grandson, they ended up in Oregon. It surprised me, and they sent me pictures when I was there in Idaho that they were watching the eclipse, and I thought that was really awesome of them doing that. I had no idea they were going to go do that.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, photo equipment that you're going to need. Obviously a camera. If you can, get a full frame camera. I shoot with Canon R5s. They're mirrorless. They're just short of 50 million pixels. You will find that depending on your lens, you'll do some cropping. The more pixels you have, the more you can crop out and still have a pretty good image. The images that I shot in 2017 was, I think 1DX Mark, the normal one, or Mark II, I don't remember. Had about 20 some million pixels, and I still cropped quite a bit out of it sometimes. Spare batteries. Two things that you make sure you have plenty of: batteries and media cards. Make sure they're freshly charged batteries. And make sure you have about 3 times the media cards that you think you'll want. Media cards are cheap anymore. My cameras have 2 slots, and they will both, I have 256 gig cards in them. And I have 3 sets of them for each camera, and I'll probably go through most of those. So, which means a lot of editing time later. Lenses. Let's talk a little bit about lenses, and I'll show you at the very end. At least a 300 millimeter. If you plan on going down there with your 70 to 200, you'll get some images, but they're not going to be close. And I'll show you at the end some of the images that are 200 millimeter. If the frame is this big, your son's going to be this big. It'll get you an image, but not a great image. If you don't have long lenses, consider renting them. A lot of people that, when I talk to them about equipment, I strongly advise rent it, try it out before you spend, $15,000 on an expensive lens. You can probably rent it for $500 for the week or something, a whole lot less money than what you may end up spending on it to buy it. Good lens for the price. If you look at these 150 to 600 lenses, They're in the, what, $1,200-1,500 range. They're not bad. A fixed lens is gonna be a little bit sharper. I know Canon, for the mirrorless, they have two lenses, a 600mm f11 and an 800 f11. They're in the price range of $600 to $800 each, cheap. So, you know, look at a long lens. If you can't afford one, rent it. Rent it to get a little experience before you actually shoot with it, but rent it. Filters, we already talked about those. One of the best places if you want to buy filters is Thousand Oaks Optical. Prices are reasonable. They have a huge inventory. I probably have, I won't tell my wife how many. I probably have 30 or 40 different filters, different sizes, stuff like that. Some of them have little things that screw on. One of the things I've gotten into in the last couple of years is magnetic filters, where boom, I mean, they're on, they're off. Very easy. Tripods. Heaviest duty tripod you can find. If you have one of these little travel tripods, something like that, rent another one. My tripods, I use Really Right Stuff. My biggest one, the leg on it is, I think, like 2.5 inches or something. And if I throw my 600 on it with, and keep in mind, the wind's gonna blow. So I hang weights on it. Because if you have a long lens and a body on there, it becomes a sail. And there's nothing like you're standing here shooting and suddenly you sort of out of the corner of your eye, see your $20,000 1200mm start to take a dump. So put weight bags on them if you can. Gimbal heads, we talked about that. Shutter release cables and glasses, we touched on that already. Batteries, I cannot emphasize. Charge your batteries, and before the eclipse starts, just a few minutes before you get into C1, change all your batteries. Get fresh batteries in there. And be sure that you have plenty of juice in them. Checklists, I'm a believer in checklists. The older I get, the more of a believer I am in it. So, you know, I make checklists and make sure I have all the right gear. Nothing like getting somewhere and it's like, oh, where's my 2X or my 1.4X? You know, your teleconverters, things like that. And then be sure your lenses and sensors are clean. Especially your sensors. How many of you clean your own sensors? A few of you, okay. If you don't, take it to a good camera store and have them clean it. Because there's nothing like getting back home and finding out there is a spot right in the middle of every image. And you have 4,000 images to edit. And it's a pain.
Are there any camera stores around?
Image One, and they do clean sensors. Riverside, off of Magnolia.
Redlands.
No, most, and it's unfortunate. That's part of everybody's buying from, you know, B&H and places like that. Most of the local stores have shut down.
Yeah.
So I know Image One does. Yeah, Sammy's.
Yeah, food spot, LA, Pasadena,
And
and,
There's
San Diego.
piles in Covina.
For Nikon, though, you bring your camera in beforehand and get them checked out and they'll be.
When you're doing something like this isn't something like, okay, I messed up, we'll just go shoot it again next weekend.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen. The next eclipse after the April one in the US is 20 years. My chances of being alive then are
Yes, in the 20s.
slim, huh? I told her I'm gonna live to be 115. I doubt it, but it'd be nice. Okay, get to your location early. One of the other things, and Russ touched upon it, is level your tripod because you are going to be moving, especially with a longer lens. It's amazing how fast that sun moves in a 600mm. And you will constantly be moving it. And there's nothing, if you don't level that tripod, that sun is going to twist a little bit on you. And there's nothing like the further you go up into it, that sun starts twisting because your tripod wasn't level. Which means then you have to go back in to Lightroom and twist them all back to the same. It's sort of a pain, so it won't take you but 2-3 minutes to level your tripod. And it's, the reason I tell you that is because of personal experience. Make sure your filters fit. Position. I use my screen. I don't look through my camera. I use a screen on it. If for some reason I'm looking at through my lens, and this probably would never happen, but that filter blows off and I see that bright sun, because in a 600 millimeter, it's going to be magnified many, many times. I'm going to have some eye damage. So I like looking through my screen for these things.
Plus, once you way up high, it's.
Yeah,
Neck
it's easier.
breaking to go to the fears. You
Yeah.
have a tilt screen, you can.
Yeah.
What about using like an off-screen monitor?
I'm sorry,
Off-screen monitor.
better yet. Problem is, it's going to take power. And be sure you have plenty of power, because you're looking at something, these typically are going to be in the 3 to 4 hour from C1 to C4. So make sure that whatever you're powering will work for 3 or 4 hours. Good question. Okay, finding focus. How many of you shot like Milky Way, night shots, stuff like that? Okay. How many of you focused it? I try to get mine in focus before it gets dark. And then you go into zoom. Oh, dang, that was the focus ring, not the zoom ring. You hit the wrong ring. Suddenly, everything's out of focus. What I do, again, because I've made mistakes, is I find focus and then I tape it down and I put it on manual. That way, if I accidentally try to turn it, it won't turn. And I use some heavy duty duct tape, at least electrical tape or something that's, and you wrap it 2 or 3 times. Make sure you cannot refocus that. So find the focus, go to manual, tape it down. Carl, you said.
I was gonna say about manual focus, the autofocus, because the sun moves, you can autofocus on the sun, but then it moves and then it goes out of focus.
Yeah,
But it does help that, in fact, we have right now a lot of sunspots, because it's difficult when you have a blank sun to focus on.
Yeah.
It's I mean, you do the autofocus on the edge and then leave it, but it's hard to, sunspots is a lot easier to focus on.
well, in film days, infinity used to be infinity.
Before zoom.
Infinity is not infinity anymore. Sometimes it's beyond infinity. They should write a song about that, right?
Well, that's how autofocus lenses work. They have to go back beyond.
Yes.
Back forward.
And as it heats and expands or cools and doesn't expand, focus is going to change slightly.
If on a zoom lens and you decide you want to, change your stuff, it's not most zoom lenses are not afocal. So the moment you change your zoom,
It will change
it'll
focus.
change
Yeah.
focus.
That's why you want to set it up and don't touch anything. But some people do.
So Bob, I have a question, talking about infinity.
Mhm.
If I've already pre-focused where I've pre-focused my 600 millimeter all the way out at 600, and then I decide to zoom in, will that sit there and change my focus?
Absolutely. Yeah. It will. One of the things that I do in focusing, I focus on my screen because I can zoom in to a 10x. But this is all pre-focusing before everything starts. I will get the focus, I think, then I will 10x it. And oftentimes, more than half the time, I'd say it's slightly soft. So I will adjust it, and then I'll take an image and zoom in on that. Once I've decided that's the point, that's when I tape it down.
Well, let me ask you, Bob, because I know you've been shooting with an R6.
R5.
Oh, now I noticed on my wife, when I focus it, it has a couple triangles that will come together.
Yes.
Does that work well all the time?
Well, there's 2 things other than and I think the R6 has it. There is the arrows, which actually some of the older film cameras did exactly that for focus, the rangefinder cameras. There's also, and I'm trying to think of what, in cinema, they do a color change. You turn on manual focus and you can
Focus
shoot.
speaking.
I'm sorry?
A lot of people call it focus speaking.
Yeah, speaking. You can change the color to red or purple or green, I forget what colors. And you can, whatever that color is, that plane is in focus. But when you're working on something that is that distance away, it's a little more difficult. That's where playing with this and practicing on this before the actual day of the eclipse is going to benefit you. Put your filters on and photograph the sun. You don't have to have a moon sliding into it. Just photograph it and see how it's going to react.
Suppose you get set, you find out what your exposures are ahead of time.
Yeah.
And, you always can go out in your backyard and shoot the sun.
Yeah. Okay, after you do all that, you're ready to start your photography. Make sure, in all of my tripods, I have what's called an apron. I can throw things in there, you know, if I've got filters I want to take off. It's a little thing that just Velcros around. If you don't have one of those, get it, they're cheap. Amazon sells them, everybody sells them. But in there, make sure you have batteries and media cards in case your batteries run out or, you know, things like that. Throw a cold drink in there because, you know, you don't want to walk away too far or have a, you know, an ice chest or something close to you. I have a wife that does all that for me, so very nicely. Okay, one of the things, and I was going to touch on this at the end, is decide what kind of photography you want to do. Are you doing only still photography? Are you doing video? Are you doing time lapse? Are you, you know, because your camera will be set up a little different for each one of those. And your editing obviously will be different. Because if you're doing, say, a time lapse, you need a little wider angle lens because you're not going to have time to move that lens as that sun's moving. So you want to pick the point where C1 is and where C4 is and put a lens on that's going to grab all of that and a little bit of foreground. So, you know, you've got to make your choices ahead of time and then set up for it. If you're doing a time lapse or a video, start about 5-10 minutes before C1 and let it run through C4. Get a beginning and an end. You can always edit it out, but you can't add to it later. And I can't emphasize this enough. Monitor your images. There's nothing like in the days of film when we shot weddings, you know, you'd have people, oh, you got some great images. Yeah, and my mind said, yeah, in about 2 weeks, I'll know if I did or didn't. The advantage of digital, obviously, is boom, I can look at it and I know instantly. So, you know, occasionally look at the image. If you want to turn on every screen, you can turn it on or off. Turn it on a short 2 seconds. If you want to view the image, it's going to use a little more power. But if you want to view them, do that. Suggested settings. Let's talk a little bit about that. Typically, what time are we? Oh, 8:15. Typically, I'm going to shoot aperture priority. I will probably shoot at around 5.6 f8, somewhere in there. I don't want a very long exposure, so I'm going to push my ISO a little bit. My camera, I can shoot without noise at 10 to 20,000 ISO. Once I get beyond 20,000, I've shot at 40 and I have to denoise it. So I will probably shoot at around 6,400 for most of these images. And sometimes I just set it on auto ISO and let the camera decide what it wants to do. Shutter speed, that's going to vary with the focal length of your lens that you're shooting with. If you don't shoot RAW, learn to shoot it before you shoot this eclipse. RAW will contain so much more information than any JPEG will. And if you're underexposed, you can adjust it much easier in RAW than you can in JPEG. And we're gonna talk about bracketing. Everybody knows what bracketing is, I assume. Almost all professionals bracket. If you ask them and they say, oh no, I never bracket, they're lying to you. They are. I usually bracket 5 steps and I go about a stop in each step. Something like this, that's about what I'm gonna do. It's gonna consume a lot more media and more batteries, but I'm covering my butt just in case I do something wrong. As many years as I've been photographing, I still make mistakes. That happens. You just want to be able to erase that mistake later, hopefully. So, spot metering. Some people spot meter because what's your subject? It's the sun. You don't care about the sky and all that. Your subject is that sun. So if you want a spot meter, but make sure that that spot meter then is on the sun, not on a dark area, because you're gonna be 10 stops off if it's on a dark area. Make sure you know when to put your filter on, when to take it off. Non-camera related things, bring a lawn chair. It's a long day. And the older I get, the more I appreciate that lawn chair. Bring something to sit on, an ice chest. Binoculars, if you have filters on them, sometimes it's nice to just take a quick look at it apart from the camera. Sunscreen. You're going to be in the sun for 3 to 5 hours. Put some sunscreen on. The apron I talked about. Make sure you bring something to set your gear on. If you're on the ground, you don't want your bag on the ground. You can buy these little TV trays for next to nothing. Sandbags, I touched on that, and have something you can weigh your tripod down. The other thing, and I haven't touched on it yet, is damp, white washcloths. Dampen them, don't make them soaking wet, but dampen them, put them in a Ziploc bag, and because your camera bodies are mostly black. How's black in the sun for 5 hours? Hot. Throw a damp cloth over it. And if it dries out, which it will, change it. So if you have a black lens, throw it over the lens because they will get hot. You want to control that a bit. I touched on some of this already. What I haven't touched on, as soon as you get into total, you will be able to see Mercury and Venus. It is not a totally dark sky, a black sky, but it's almost like a twilight. But stars, you will see stars at noon. It is amazing. The horizon takes on this warm glow of sunset. As the shadow moves, we already talked about the air, birds. If you're in an area where there's flowers that typically close up, like say in the desert, something like that, flowers will close up because of the temperature change and the sun's going away. So what do? They close. Take a deep breath, back away from the camera for about 15, 20 seconds and look around you. Not everything is about photography. Sometimes it's about the experience of what you're looking at. You will never experience something like this in your life again, unless you go to another eclipse. So back away from it and just look around. Post-production, and I touched already, stills, video, time-lapse, slideshow. AI, I put a question mark on there because you're going to see a lot of AI stuff come out of this. I'm struggling with AI. I really am. I'm a photographer. I'm not a computer geek. And as much as I like to play with them at times, I still like being a photographer better. I like being out in the field shooting. Computers, to me, are necessary evil here. But, okay, I touched upon focal lengths. If you see that top left one, that's a 200 millimeter on a full frame, 135 on a cropped. And as you progress through that, you'll see how much closer that's gonna be. So if you're thinking you're gonna get this with your 70 to 200, that's what you're gonna get. You can see it, but it's not gonna be real big. The bottom image there is showing you the eclipse stages, and that's the annular. If you look at the center image, that's what you're gonna see. It will be, the sun will be totally covered, but there will be enough light around it. It won't be only reflected light you see. It will be sunlight that you're seeing in addition to that. The annular is not as spectacular as a total. However, I would strongly advise you to photograph because it's practice. You're gonna learn a lot if you photograph that annular eclipse that you can apply to the total eclipse 6 months later. So, okay, this is the workshops I'm doing. We're gonna be in Mexican Hat, Utah for the annular. The entire duration is just short of 3 hours. Where we're going, it's 4 hours and 36 seconds, which is one of the longest, and that's why I chose it. The start time is at 9:10 in the morning, and it'll finish about noon. The total eclipse, we're going to southern Texas. It's 2 hours, 45 minutes, 53 seconds where we're going, and about 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The longest is actually just slightly inside Mexico. It's 4 hours and 25 or 4 minutes and 25 seconds. So it's only about 5 seconds longer. Start time is at noon, ends about 3 o'clock local time. So. Other questions?
Have you researched the cloud now, for the entire map in the United States?
Most of it. Places that I'm interested in going, yes.
I'm thinking of near Santa Fe,
New Mexico for the annular.
Yeah, in October.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna go right through, well, that's gonna be, yeah, probably out of the map, it's coming through, right through Four Corners.
Yeah.
Going right through Albuquerque.
Albuquerque
On the
is
balloon
almost
Fiesta, where the best place is gonna be the balloon Fiesta, field.
What do you think the cloud cover will be like?
Well, it's gonna be morning through there, so there is a possibility of clouds a little bit higher than where we're gonna be at, but not much. The problem you're gonna run up against is, especially when you mentioned the balloon field, I would expect 200,000 people there. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. It is gonna be,
Can I ask a question about the same thing?
Yeah.
I have a reservation at the Balloon Festival in my RV for that week. So I'm gonna be up on top there with, and they said they're gonna be flying the balloons during the annular. Have you got any special tips for shooting the balloons during the annular? I mean, they're gonna be
up on the cliff.
well, I'll be up on the higher area where all the RVs park there. It's just a little ways up. I mean, the balloons land right next to the RVs, so.
Yeah, they do. There is, and you can see it from the RV park. There's a cliff you can get up to.
Okay,
That's probably less than a quarter mile, maybe an eighth of a mile from where the RV park is. That would probably be a good location to shoot, but there's probably a good chance of a lot of people being there. If
Yeah,
you
well,
get
there-
there early enough and get a good seat.
I'm parked right there for a week, so I mean, I'm in my RV, so I'm gonna be there plenty early. The other question I had though is, I've got Thousand Oaks filters, a bunch of them for the different cameras. Annular, do you just leave it on the whole time?
Yes,
Okay,
don't take it
Thank
off at all for the annular.
leave it on the entire time because you've always got the ring.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, I hadn't thought about the thing that you mentioned about all the stars coming. I hadn't thought about all the things you talked about, the stars coming out at the 2017, so at the 2023 one, I will certainly be using a little wider angle lens So maybe I can pull out some of those stars along with the solar eclipse. Now, the solar eclipse though, is typically, you're looking more, would you say more at moonlight is what we're looking at because it's the ring around the sun?
You're gonna get a lot of sunlight. You probably won't get the dark sky that we saw in the total. Because there's gonna be a fair amount of sunlight there.
You're talking about the annual, or are we talking?
Annuals, yeah. yeah.
I'm talking about the one in April.
Oh, that one, yeah, if you look through some of your images in two thousand
So I'm gonna
seventeen,
go look at some of those
Yeah.
images, because maybe I will be able to bring out some of those stars.
yeah, they're there.
That's actually will be a comment that be right next to the coordinate.
Yes.
That's gonna be right next to the sun, you know.
Yeah.
It'll be visible during totality.
By the way, just, you touched on it earlier in a conversation. The Northern Lights were visible in Washington yesterday.
Yeah.
So they have been for a couple of days,
Yeah, well, if they maybe even come down all the way down here, you know.
but you can't see them.
Photographically.
Yeah,
And when they have, we had that happen in the end of April, where I ran out to Joshua Tree and got a red glow.
Yeah.
Over the trees, but.
where we went to Seebeck, they were photographing Northern Lights there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm amazed at that.
You had a question?
Yeah, during the 91 eclipse, I was looking at the sun through binoculars during totality. We
Mhm.
do that.
Yes.
Totality. I saw a couple of amazing solar flares. Did you get any photos of that? Did you bring them tonight?
Everything that we shot for that went to my client. I can't.
Oh,
And that was film and I don't have access to them.
I just have it in my mind, but that was spectacular.
Yeah.
Seeing the fire coming up.
And you, if I could zoom in on this one, this is only one of hundreds of images I have. You'll see the flares. As I zoom into that, they're there.
Well, you do see, Bob, you do see in your images that are up there, you see little red spots.
Yeah.
All around the sun, so
Yeah, that's
those are your solar.
Those solar flares are bigger than our Earth is. I don't know if you realize that. So if one of those hit our Earth, we know.
Sorry, I forgot.
Harrington.
What is the filter you're talking about to use in the solar eclipse?
It's called a Mylar filter. If you get on Amazon and just search solar filters, it'll lead you to a whole bunch of
Yeah,
stuff.
there's basically two, there's the Thousand Oaks ones, which gives a kind of a yellow tint.
Yeah.
And then there is the Vader, BAADER, which basically.
It's a black filter.
It's a white, it's a white, kind of bluish white.
Yeah.
Cast, because the sun's actually white, it's not yellow.
Yeah.
So, neither of them are perfectly, exactly what, I mean, Vader's probably closer to, a white sun, but everybody thinks yellow for the sun, so. It depends what color, I guess you want them, but.
And some people will take those filters and just put them over the sunshade and put a rubber band around them. They don't have to be perfectly flat. They can have wrinkles and it makes no difference. There was another hand.
Yeah, when you adjust in post, what types of adjustments do you normally make, you know?
It's gonna depend on what I'm gonna do with those images. If I'm doing a series of images, one is I wanna color correct the same. If I'm doing like a time lapse, where I may have 600-800 images in that time lapse, again, I will color correct all the same, so we're not flashing back and forth between colors. And then I also try to center everything. As you move your camera, especially with the longer lenses, you're not going to get it in center every time. And I don't really care if I do or don't, because I know in post I can do that, and I will fix it. On my screen, I will put something so I can place each of them in the center. So I don't usually adjust the exposure because I bracketed. I will pick one of those. It may be the first image, may be the third image, but whatever I pick will be the same image every time. So I'm not a big believer in a lot of post-production. I try to get it as right as I can in the camera.
Noise or anything for,
Only if I'm gonna shoot higher ISOs. Typically 20,000 and above, I might denoise. I don't really like what Lightroom has done with their denoise because it's now an AI. You don't have as much control over it. So I'm looking at some third-party stuff.
What about cinema lenses?
If you can afford them, they're great. But they're not typically fast or long.
I know that the red, 180 millimeter right now is 1.2.
Yes.
That's, really normal.
I have a 135, 1.8, I have a 200, 1.8 Canon lenses. And I'm probably gonna take my 200 with me in a couple of days before I play with it a little bit, see if I want to use it for that. You don't have to have a super fast lens. Typically you'll find they're sharper, primarily because they're an expensive lens and they're fixed focal length. So cinema lenses are awesome, but they're unique.
We didn't talk about using extenders, 1.4 or 2.
Yes, I have sets and sets and sets of RF and EF. I use my 1.4 often. The 2 when I absolutely need it. Because I have a lot of pixels, I can also crop, which is sort of a bit the same way. At one of the Eagle workshops, I don't think you were at that one. I had an 800 millimeter with a 1.4, a 2X, and a 1.4 stacked because they were a long ways away. It was an ugly image, but I got the shot. So, was there another hand over here? No.
No, you answered my question. I realized you were talking about converters and not the f-stops on the lenses.
Yes.
You were saying 1.4, and that's why I was asking.
Yeah. You'll find you don't need a super fast lens for this. You know, like I say, I'm probably going to be set typically at 5.6 or f8. That is a sweet spot of most of my lenses, is in that range. So, do you guys know what a sweet spot is in a lens? Usually it's about 2.5 to 3 stops from wide open. It gives you your best image, very little, if any, chromatic aberration. So that's something you want to be aware of. However, there are times that I have one of my lenses is a 1.0 lens. Incredible lens. Depth of field. If I photograph your eyelashes, the whole eyelash wouldn't be in focus. It's awesome lens. And the edges tend to be a little soft, but it's a 1.0. You know, as you get faster, there's some advantages and some disadvantages. So, other questions?
Yes. One last stupid question. We talked about high ISO. I shoot with the D850 and a Z9, so the high ISO is not a big deal with them. However, you talked about film. I also have a 6x7 film camera. Yeah, RB67. I had a couple of them years ago and I kept one. So I play with it now and then. What the heck do you do for something like that if you're going to try to shoot this with film? I mean, obviously there's no such thing as really high ISO except just push.
Buy a lot of film.
Oh, yeah. Well, it takes you too long to load it. Unless
Yeah,
you have
I
a
know.
lot of backs.
That's why when we shot with the Hasselblad, I had 12 70 millimeter backs.
Okay.
And, you know,
But are you using just a high ISO film then, or a low ISO film, or?
I was using 100.
Okay, that was my real question: is where do you start? I mean, you know, on film. So
You don't, you know, on film, this is something that the film is for me, if I were to shoot it, it would be just for the fun of shooting it.
Well, me too. That's the only reason I do that is just for the entertainment. So, but I hate to just get nothing out of a roll too, so.
Yeah, again, you can bracket, but you know, on that camera, you're gonna have so few images that if you bracket even 3 images,
You're done.
you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, because that's a 6x7, if I remember.
Right, 6x7, you get 10 shots. That's
Yeah.
it.
So, you know, bracket, because I bracket five stops or 5 times.
So
And
that's
that's
2
2
shots.
images. And like I say, buy a lot of film and be
Okay.
ready. I
right.
would honestly, I would bring somebody else to change it for you.
Yeah, well, I have that option, so. But I'm supposed to be shooting primarily with the 850 and the Z9, I'm sure. I just thought it would be fun being on there.
Yeah.
So, alrighty, thank you.
Your Z9 to me would be your best bet for that.
Yeah, it's a nice camera.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So you're using a remote to click the shutter? And how often are you clicking it?
I will probably have one of them set up. My 1200 will probably be set up to click every 5 seconds because I can do it in camera. I will have the ability to look at it and move it slightly because that long of a lens is going to be moved often. And I'll just let it take a picture every 5 seconds. But that means about every minute, I'm gonna have to relocate it. So,
That's a built-in intervalometer?
yes, yeah. As much as you can, you don't wanna touch your camera. So I have a number of different remotes. Some of them are wireless, you know, some of them are wired. So you don't wanna touch it unless you absolutely have to. If you're changing batteries, if for some reason your battery doesn't last that long, obviously change it quickly between exposures or media cards. You're gonna miss a few shots, but you know, that can't be helped.